Hello, viewers out there in viewer TV land. Thank you for joining us on another exciting episode of AGI, Anthony and Greg on Intelligence, and we have a sweet treat for you tonight. Not only do you get to listen to Greg and myself, but we also have Mike Pettigrew that is joining us this evening for today's report, which will always be special because we love it when Mike gets to join in and we get to have some guest stars.
Maybe the sweet treat is they don't have to listen to us as much.
That was kind of maybe where I was going with that
I
one.
got that. I understood that, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, Anthony Maggio, Greg Prost, and Mike Pettigrew here for today's rendition. So, Greg, what are we starting off with this evening?
I had a couple things I was going to add on to. I think last time we talked a little bit about Waymo rides that I took, and of course I wanted to do a little bit more research on that, and I was amazed that they've taken 1 million rides in San Francisco, and the number of accidents is 10% of the number of accidents of regular drivers. I was shocked by that number.
Every time the Waymo gets into an accident, then a
per ride, right? Per million rides for the public, there are 10 times more accidents and more fatal and injury accidents. I was shocked at the numbers. And then half the time the Waymo accidents are arguably, somebody else's thing. So there's been a couple of really interesting articles that say, if we move in this direction, you're going to save millions and millions of lives and injuries and things going forward. I was, something that we just didn't come up. It's cool, it's fun to use, but I saw a future meme where somebody said, "Hey, you mean you guys let people actually drive cars? I mean, I've met people before. Anybody could drive a car?" It's like, yeah, well, wasn't that must have been kind of dangerous? Oh yeah, millions of people died. Yep, all the time. And wow, really? How we're just used to it.
Right.
Anyway.
But something about the control, right? That's always the thing that's hard to give up because we just always tend naturally to think we're better at that one.
No question.
Well, as someone who has a self-driving car, I can tell you that was one of the first things that it does take some time to get used to that. And I still have people who freak out. I think I took it to one conference and we were driving it back and forth in the rain from a local establishment, let's just say. And the way it drove in the rain was, you can just almost see it learning. Last night I had a very late hockey game. I drove it to the hockey game and it snowed on the way back. And last year when I drove it in the snow, it just freaked out. And one of the things it does, it just barks at you and screams, it can't see the lines, it can't see this. And last night there was blowing snow and ice and everything. And it just poked right along. And, a couple times it wanted me to jump in. And the way it handles pedestrians in town.
Did it follow the lines of the person in front of you? That's been an argument that, in driving in the snow, one of the problems is a human being will follow the person in front of them, versus the Tesla knows exactly where the road is and is trying to stay in the middle of the lane, and maybe that's not the best thing to do when you're driving those conditions. I remember somebody asking me that a few years back.
Yeah. So just the difference between last winter and this winter already, and I've only driven it a couple times now, or once really with the snow. This morning, roads were really bad. It was foggy. We had a dense fog and it was snowing. It was really kind of weird, but you get to see the visualization. So one of the things I think is neat is you get to see what it believes it sees. And one thing is if it determines where the lines are, it just puts lines down. Obviously, it's not seeing every one of the dash marks and things like that. But the crispness, the more fuzzy it gets towards the shoulder, you can tell it's having more of an issue. And when that starts to go away, I drove it out onto a lawn, and it really doesn't like being out on the lawn, just completely off road with no two tracks, no nothing. The visualization basically just shuts down and goes, I have no idea where you are. And so it's not ready for that type of stuff yet, but we were parking out, we were going to a place out and just parking in the lawn in the field. And So it didn't like that too much. It didn't like the tall grass. But yeah, when you're on there, I think one of the things it is starting to do, and that's one of the things we're all taught when we're drive, right? Is that look at the car in front of you. They've already gone there. They're already creating they should be on the road, right? So it's taking that relative position and then kind of making some conclusions off of it, I think.
Well, early on, I think it was Musk who was being interviewed, and somebody was saying, "Look, it can't even drive on in the snow. It barks at you like just as you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and what people you expect people just to trust it?" And he said, "Look, we've driven millions of miles. It's autonomously driving around. Yeah, maybe we're having a little trouble on snow. We will figure that out, right? We figured
Right.
out all this other stuff. We're driving 80 miles an hour, moving in and out of traffic and everything. We're not that worried about snow. It's an extra piece that's going to come on here." But I thought that was a good answer. Like, relax,
Well,
everybody. It's not perfect right off the bat, but
and it's added now parking. Like you can now tell it when you get to a place, find a parking spot. And so I can hit the button in my driveway, it pulls out, drives me to the ice arena, finds a parking spot and parks the car and then puts it in park.
yeah.
I can do it without touching anything on the car. 20 miles.
Good stuff. And we talked a little bit last week about Waymo versus having the LiDAR versus having just visual
Right.
only. I'm not so sure LiDAR is going to go away or that Tesla is going to win this one, but it's interesting how many miles they have going.
If we're going to put any money on it, though,
Yeah.
I tell you, I mean, Musk would be the one you're going to put money.
I agree.
I would put money on that.
I
We'll
agree.
figure
It's
it out.
it's the one thing that I do disagree with him on. Of all the things he's done, I'm surprised he's been as stubborn as he has been, but he knows a lot more than I do, so he must see the end goal is going to get him there, But, of course, he said, they had full autonomous driving, 10 years ago, so.
Minor details.
Yes,
minor
exactly,
details.
exactly.
Doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
No, that's good. All right,
So
so
when you did
wrapping
the
that
Waymo,
one. What's that?
well, I was just gonna say, when you did the Waymo, did you was it driverless or did it have a driver in it?
No, it was fully driverless, and you just got in the back seat. So it was. We talked a little bit last week. It was really impressive. Just like you said, the way it anticipated things, and it shows everything. You can see all the people, and so it felt real comfortable, and it just made a bunch of moves that were human-like. It really.
Yeah.
It freaked me out in that way, but at the same time, just calmed me down. My wife said the same thing. Like within 30 seconds, we were really calm on it. Whereas when I've been into Teslas, they've made me a little more nervous, I gotta say, depending on the situation. But
Hey, 10% less. There
yes,
we go. Focus.
yes.
Less accidents. 90%
Yeah.
safer. There we go.
Those are some serious stats, though. So
The future is coming. I wonder how that'll go in Michigan, right? With all as embedded as the dealerships and car makers are in this economy, I find it hard that we'd be probably the last ones to get regulatory approval for large scale.
Waymo is
just
coming to
Waymo.
Detroit, so next year Waymo's coming.
I
to
can
Detroit.
see that
So
for sure, but
that one I would
before
see.
I
Yeah.
can drive me from Rochester to Detroit, I think that's going to be a ways out. I think.
Well, they're just starting to go on the expressway in San Francisco. I think they're starting at the end of the year where they're going to allow rides there. So they weren't doing it after years being out there. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. But
Well,
What
Anthony,
a
you have a
timeline.
good point with Michigan because the other thing that, and I think I've heard Greg talk about this before, is the disruptive impact of these technologies. Like you said, 90% fewer people dying. What will that do to the insurance industry? And one of the things in Michigan is we have lovely no-fault insurance, right? And that is very much that's a higher premiums usually associated with that. And a lot of insurance companies and a lot of automakers. Tesla has their own insurance company, right? They don't sell insurance in Michigan, so those types of things I think are going to have the disruption to the insurance and risk industry is going to be pretty significant.
I just want lower premiums. That's what I want.
exactly,
They're going to
Should
still
all-
get their profit, right?
Yeah.
They're
Yep.
not going to, but the having to pay out should go down.
Yep.
So the premium should go down, and hopefully less impact on.
And you'll probably have
mass
new
layoffs
entrants, that using AI to build the company and being able to compete a lot better because they're going to lower the prices, knowing the odds are a lot lower of risk. So
Yeah, Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I had a request that came up from one of our viewers. So I want to jump in and do a viewer request in this one, because as we've said in some of the other episodes, we are always looking for ideas and things that you all subscribe to hear, want to see, and talk about. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can't subscribe through the TV. That would be kind of weird. I don't think that happens yet. Technology's not there
Could
yet.
be streaming YouTube to the screen.
Exactly. That's true. It could be YouTube on the screen. So one of the requests that we had come in was use cases personally. So not talking about business or work. Like, what are some everyday use cases? And I'll start off with one of them, and then see what you guys have to say on that. But the one that comes to mind is for really kind of the medical side. So a friend of mine is going through a lot of complicated medical issues, and anybody that's ever had that come up with a family member, when you have something out of the blue that's pretty serious come up, the world changes, right? I mean, it's doctor's appointments, treatment plans, meetings with probably more doctors than you'll ever remember names of. And it can get very, very scary very fast. And when you're in those situations, how often you're not going to remember everything that's going on, right? I mean, you're not going to remember, okay, you're just trying to cognitively stay straight. You're just trying to just keep functioning and trying to absorb this brand new plethora of information and world that you may not have ever had to be a part of before. And so one of the use cases in that case really has been utilizing the AI tools with what the diagnosis is, getting, Greg, I know you've said, like, explain it to me like I'm a fourth grader, right? The doctors, oftentimes, it seems we get them for 5 minutes. And here's your diagnosis, here's what it is, here's what we're doing, any questions? I just found out about it. How am I going to have a question like in 3 seconds, and I'm still like in deer in the headlight mode with this? And so they've been using it as also like a personal assistant. So going to doctor's offices, recording, and then using that transcription to feed into the AI tools to say, here's what they said my diagnosis is, here's the treatment plans. Because one thing a lot of times is and I don't want to say it's always, but how often insurance plays a role maybe in what your treatment's going to be. And so having things like the AI tools, being able to just absorb all of the information, what's going on with you, what do you have, what tests did they did? You can upload, everybody, consult your own risks on uploading personal stuff, but on some of the tools, take your name off, but you could you can upload your test results and the scans and the information and say, here's everything that I got. Here's what the lab work shows. Here's what they show on the scan. Here's the radiology, report here, or MRI
here's
report.
All the medications I'm taking.
Yeah, here's all the medications I'm taking. Here's the path they're recommending. Is this the best path? Are there new experimental treatments? We're assuming, and I love the medical profession in a lot of ways, but it is, a medical practice, right? There's a lot of practice that goes on. And is the doctor I'm seeing...
I've never heard that joke.
You've never heard that?
Medical practice. I like that.
That's why they call it medical practice, right? It's because it's a practice.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. It's not a medical for sure answer on or whatever.
Right.
So, there's a lot of learning that even the doctors have to do, right? If a new procedure comes out, it's not instantly available everywhere, even if it's, through all the trials and it's released. Maybe it's new equipment, maybe certain therapies. It's like the equipment isn't necessarily out there yet. Right. But when you're dealing with your own well-being or a family member or something, these tools can really help kind of pull together and give you a pretty unbiased opinion about what's going on. The machine doesn't care it's a machine. It's not a person. It doesn't care one way or another. It's just going to tell you what's happening, right? And if you tell it, is this the best treatment for me? And, maybe it comes up with some different options, then that's something you can bring to your doctor at the next meeting, office visit, probably just meetings at that point, about, what about this? Is this an option? Or even using some of the research tools to find out what are the current clinical trials out there for my diagnosis? Who's doing some study, who's doing...
Or something in South Korea, right? That just a paper that was released yesterday, and you have the doctor over there going, I haven't seen this in 10 years. Let me think about, no, I want to know what's going on right now, right? That's exactly it.
Yeah,
Sure.
And that's the thing. And being able to keep track of that, because especially as you're going through, in certain cases, the treatments, the mental, a lot of times these medications deal with, you're going to get some mental fog. You're going to get maybe not quite 100% remembering things, or maybe the order might be coming a little fuzzy. So being able to, keep track of what's going on, what's progressing, what's not, and to keep up to date, like, okay, there were no new treatments or things then. What's coming? How far away is that? What are some things I can do? And so in this example, it was shared that they had a side effect, I'll call it, and they didn't know what was going on. And I'm trying to be a little bit vague because I don't want to go too in depth on what the issues and stuff were, but they had a complication. And so they were like, what is this from? They couldn't figure out what was causing this physical issue. And so they asked the AI tool, and in this case, it was Grok. And so they asked Grok and said, hey, I had this come up. What can cause this? And sure enough, one of the items in the treatment, one of the medications can cause that effect. And that wasn't, not that every effect is disclosed on the treatments, right? But it's something that came up that, it's scary. If all of a sudden you're having a hard time moving, swallowing, thinking, something blinking, something comes up, it's scary. And in this case, it happened to be like 7 o'clock at night. It was in the evening. So you can't call the doctor. I mean, I guess you could try to get the on-call after hours, right? But you're going to get the after-hours message. Maybe they get with you, maybe whatever, or you got to wait till the next day. And you just want the relief of the peace of mind, knowing like, okay, is this a normal thing? Can I expect this? Is it okay? Or is it something else more complicated that's coming up? Yeah. And of course, it gives the information, yep, that can happen. So they then bring that up with the doctor and says like, hey, I had this happen. This and they were like, no, that doesn't get caused by anything. That's not a thing. And so then they brought the information forward and said, well, it says this medication has a chance to cause this issue, and this is what I'm experiencing. And so the doctor then went and did some research, as they should do, and they come back and said, well, it's really rare that happens. Like that can happen, but it's really rare. It's really rare. But it did.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And I'm sorry, the 8 years of medical school and all that, you can't remember everything.
Of course.
There's too much going on. And the thing we always want is we want accuracy. And I think sometimes, I don't know, I'm going to use this is Anthony's phrasing on this one, but sometimes I think ego gets in the way.
Oh, no doubt.
Right? So if you're a doctor, or I even take myself, something I would call myself proficient in, and somebody challenges it otherwise, I'm like, what do you know about this? But, there's always that data-driven approach of you got to always be learning. And I think sometimes, and it seems in the medical profession, they've been not as it's been pretty popular in the research from what I found, but the day-to-day, not so much.
And they're not happy. I talked about my doc, right? And I came up and said, hey, it's telling me this, and that the check is really cheap to check what that is. And he says, give me that. He goes on his laptop. Okay. Like, what does that mean? He's like, well, I mean, if you want to have that done, we can check that. Sure. Like, okay, I would like to have that done. And it just had to check my blood. It wasn't a procedure. I'd like them to check it. He goes, okay. And so I may have told this before, came back negative. And I'm telling my wife, I want to. She's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I want to win this. I want to show him these is wrong.
The AI was right.
Well, but I really was upset. Just like, they're just like, oh, okay, nonchalant. You should be like, wow, that's cool. I'll try that next time or something, And so we're gonna force them,
and
right?
they're getting better and better, right?
Yeah,
and the thing I think sometimes gets lost is like I don't think anybody will agree that we have a perfect healthcare system here in the U.S. It is far from, I don't even know what it is half the time. But the end goal, whether you're the patient, the doctor, the advocate, the family, the goal is the same. It should be the same to get the patient better, fixed, a procedure corrected, cured, whatever it is. But there seems to just be like a fight in that sometimes, and there shouldn't be, and because it shouldn't be an ego thing. It shouldn't be they should be loving these tools because, and Mike, we've talked about this before with the AI tools, right? The human element is so important with these tools. You can't remove the human out of it, but it will make anybody that's really good infinitely better. It'll double their capability because they might not be an expert in it, take in the doctor's case, but if they're like, okay, let me look a little bit, and they use the tool, they know enough inherently that in 10 seconds they can dissect everything the AI is telling them about it and go, yes, no, that doesn't make sense because of that reason. Yes, okay. They can understand it very quickly. And for us, I kind of refer to it as it's like the great equalizer. You'll hear me say that a lot of times with AI. Not all healthcare systems are equal. If you're in a rural area or you don't have access to certain types of doctors, maybe you're in the Upper Peninsula and the nearest hospital is 3 hours away.
Or maybe you have the worst doctor in the United States. There is one doctor that's the worst, and the second worst, and third worst, and you just happen, and you don't even know.
But using it's like your own personal advocate that will make sure what they're telling you fits, and it will give you questions to ask, and at least you'll be able to have that personal advocate to make sure the outcome is the best possible scenario, because that's what everybody wants. Right.
Well, and I think that's where it starts. And then I think from there it goes to, you would hope a wider adoption, because one of the things that I don't know why it seems like today I want to talk about insurance for some reason, but here's another area, malpractice, right? So malpractice, it's largely based on human error, right? And to have, I would just expect at some point underwriters are going to want to go, did you consult AI?
Absolutely.
What other resources did you use to back up you operated on the wrong ankle, or you did this wrong, or you did that wrong. What did you do to double check? I don't know. I had ankle surgery. That's why I bring it up a couple years ago. And, the number of times and how basic things can be. So like you go in there, they ask you your name, your social security number, your date of birth, right? What are you having done? I think I was asked that probably 27 times. And at one point, somebody comes in with a big marker, right? A big Sharpie, and they go, what ankle are you having done? And they put a big X. They literally are marking your body to try to make sure these things don't happen, right? Or bad things don't happen. And you have all of these humans involved in that, and still errors take place. And you have something that, you would much rather the doctor comes in and goes, you know what? Here's your AI-driven report. Here's, I've already looked at it. This part was hallucinating, so let's not deal with that. Let's deal with this other stuff, right? So that you don't have to sit there and record the meeting and be your own advocate. You can already have that insurance, for lack of a better term, right there with it.
And you would think from a provider standpoint, right? Because and Mike, I think the insurance is so important on this, and the reason I think as the theme, whether it's car, whether it's whatever, what it does is it reduces risk. That it really does. It will take why are you looking at the right ankle when clearly the x-ray is the left ankle? Like, it's already going to yell at you about that. Like, why are you even near that patient's, like, no. But every time the malpractice costs, the unnecessary tests, right? If it can, it is good at mass amounts of data. And one I haven't seen yet that I've been waiting on is one for, and it's probably out there. I haven't looked lately, but it's good at taking an image and in comparison in aggregation to millions of images. So for instance, like, mole checks, right? So I'm like, that is one thing. There are enough images of moles, whether they're good, bad, cancerous, not cancerous, should be looked at, not looked at. Like, these healthcare systems should be using or advocating for these tools to just help find things like skin cancer earlier. And like, how quick, a non-invasive thing that you could just like, put the camera like we do and turn it on and say, look, mole's good, mole's good, mole's good. Oh, wait, look more. Nope, let's make an appointment, get that one looked at. How, and in other scenarios too, not just that, but any of the treatments, you don't need these tests, right? How often is insurance driving, right? They want revenue, the hospital systems. So you have like the doctors that want to do what's best for the patient. You have the hospital systems that just want to make money. I will say that all day long because I have never seen anything for that to be untrue. Remember, like, oh, you're here at 6 o'clock. We got to admit you for the night because we can bill Blue Cross another. I just need you to do an x-ray. I should be able to leave here by 8. Nope, admitting you. No x-rays till tomorrow. Like, why is this happening? Like that. Anyways, so the being able to treat better should reduce ultimately the costs. And I still say profit will stay the same. All these companies, they will maintain their profit, but they will get to drop all the costs and expenses plummet. They go down. And so, the revenue goes down with that. But at the end of it, they're still going to make the profit. They're still going to get money off of all these things. And it'll be better. It'll be more efficient. We'll be able to do more with less because that's what we always do. And it should be better outcomes for everyone. So, but it seems to always be just a constant fight for whatever reason. Maybe not. Maybe we'll do this again in like 5 years and it'll be like, that's all we're using.
Think about the malpractice. The malpractice will change this. So if you don't check AI and the patient does, and they can come to you and say, look, this is what you were supposed to do. How did you miss this? Right. I think they're going to be forced to use it.
And right. For the viewers, like, we're not necessarily talking about like a chat GPT just asking that, right? There are AIs that are specific for medical.
Yes.
IBM Watson was one of the first ones they did. Once they had their big Jeopardy send-off and all that, they were using that and they were pushing it into medical. They wanted to help with diagnosing and research and understanding things and patterns that people aren't seeing, but that's there in the data to investigate other things. And there's tools just for that.
And this, we had talked about machine learning programs versus LLMs, right? So the large language model, ChatGPT, Gemini, they're really good. And they're really good at listening to what you say and answering questions and that type of thing. But the pure machine learning where it's dedicated to the medical field, that's what Anthony's talking about, where people get confused. Sometimes they're just thinking about AI and they're just thinking it's just ChatGPT, but people are building these programs to do specific types of things and might be even expanded things, but much more dedicated to what we're talking about here.
And I think you're right, because it's happened with cybersecurity. So, we'll continue on insurance. So for municipalities anyways, right, it was ransomware and all that stuff started happening. So now everybody was buying cybersecurity insurance. And then all of a sudden that lasted, I don't know, maybe a couple years. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, if you want to have the cybersecurity insurance, you got to also have two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And then the next year you go to renew, well, you need two-factor authentication. You have to have these types of systems in place, and you have to have a patch management system and process, and you have to have like all these nuances. It gets more detailed every year. which
Yeah.
at the end of it, if you just had all those things, your risk is like nothing anyways. But that's the point. They don't want to pay out.
Right.
And I think you're right on the malpractice and that. As soon as they start realizing that, wait a minute,
Or you win a case.
or you win a case and they have to pay out and they lose the, and then all of a sudden they're going to go, all right, if you want to have malpractice insurance, you're going to have some sort of check or review. Yep. And that's going to lead to a little more and a little more. And then pretty soon, hopefully it's just a part of the in the office with you.
Yeah. You won't even notice it, right? They already checked it. Here's your they're reading your report out, and it's AI generated.
It's already gotten everything. The doctor has used their years of experience and knowledge of your lifestyle and your habits and whatever else to say that this makes sense, and there you go.
Imagine it being incorporated into your, like, what is it called? I have my chart, for U of M Hospital.
Yeah.
Imagine an AI piece that's tied into that, right? So they don't necessarily have to answer the questions. You could have an interaction with the model, right? The ChatGPT or whatever model. It could tell you whatever it needs to tell you, and then also report back to the doctor, hey, they called about this. So imagine having that level of detail where, your nurses, you ever try to call a doctor, right? Like you said, call after hours, but even during the day, I have a
They're
sniffle.
slammed.
All right, it's probably the virus, so don't come in, right? It seems like they never want to see you, and then when they want to see you, they want to run every test under the sun. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right on with it too.
We got to get to some use cases here.
It'll be oh my gosh. All right, so Greg, okay, so enough on that one. So we can jump on what's our next one on this one here.
No more that I think we want to go on. We got our half hour and second half hour here, right? We want to talk about. We got Mike here. I know you're using it on your a daily basis in your job here. So part of half of our time we're trying to spend it on actual uses, maybe not personal, but business related, and we'll push some personal ones to the next one here. But Mike, I know you were an early adopter. We've had many conversations. I know you've talked with Anthony as well. And so everybody has their own little anecdotes about some things. I'm curious to know what you found useful.
Well, I think, I had a couple things just even like today, right before I signed off from work and came over here, where being someone who's always been, I guess, an early adopter with Google and everything else, you kind of lock into a certain way of doing things. And with Google, it's always worked great if you knew the right search phrases or you knew the right way, or you already kind of had an answer. So we had a barcode print on our tax bills, and the barcode was reading incorrectly into our point of sale system. 40,000 tax bills go out. Can't change those now. And it affects our staff's ability to quickly process a payment when someone's in the office. And I thought I kind of had some answers. So I'm like, well, I've got this file that populates the point of sale system. Maybe I can dump that into AI and I'll tell it exactly what I want it to do. Now the file was too big and didn't really want to upload. And so I'm like, all right, maybe it could write me a little code or a little program that can put the dashes in the right place for the parcel number and remove the trailing characters that I don't need. And he goes, oh yeah, here's Python script. And I'm like, I don't really, I know the word Python. I know it's more than a snake. But other than that, I don't really know. I don't know how to run a Python, basically, is what it comes down to. And so I go, you know what? I'm just going to go back and tell it the original problem. And I just said, here's what happened. The tax bill is printed. Here's the barcode. Here's what I need it to do, or what it should have said when I first read it. And I need an easy way to fix it. And it goes, oh, well, why don't you just use this Excel formula? I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, just copy this Excel formula, drop it in the cell, put the data you want, read the barcode into cell 1, A1, and then put this code into B1, and it'll just it'll remove the characters, put in the dashes, you'll be all set. And so I did that, and that last little part took me 5 minutes. The other part where I kept trying to tell it things and try to figure it out for it, that took 2 hours. And I could have just gone to the end and just go, here's my problem. Give me some ideas on how to fix it. and it also came up with some other ideas where like, oh, there's this Chrome extension you can use if you're doing a web form, and it's like asking me questions about where I was trying to put the information, and it could even tailor the answer even more. So I think again, that just comes from experience. I said before this that a lot of what I do, I feel like I've learned backwards. I became a treasurer, and I started in the county treasurer's office, and I learned delinquent taxes before current taxes. And so I always feel like I learned things in reverse, and AI hasn't been any different for me than that. Um, I use it a ton with email correspondence. I think it's just fantastic for that. Um,
What
we
what
get involved.
what what are
Go
you
ahead.
using mostly? What ChatGPT or?
Yeah, so we now have a ChatGPT license for the city. I've got a particular issue trying to keep it as general as possible that I'm dealing with. That over the last 4 months, I believe we've emailed back and forth over 250 times. It has a set of, it's an organization that has a set of bylaws. It has the person that I'm dealing with has been very difficult to deal with, and for lack of a better term, misremembers things. So I created a project in ChatGPT where I uploaded the bylaws, all of the amendments, the master deed for this organization, and then I also put in all of the minutes for all when we've had meetings. I put in minutes for it. And so every email he sends me, I drop it in there and I go, what do you think? I basically ask you, this is where I go very vague. I go, just tell me what you think about this. And he goes, here's a very concise, I also love the customizations. You can say, this is what I want every answer to be. I want it to be, reasoned, ethical, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes through and it just basically applies those virtues or principles to it and goes, oh, well, in this meeting on this date, he agreed to XYZ. And in this message, he's basically saying the exact opposite. And here's a professional way to deal with it.
That
So
that's slick. I
it
like
even writes
that.
it. Yeah, so it's kind of like don't call him a loser, don't call him anything else. Just say if, as you might remember, back on this day, we agreed that you would provide X, Y, and Z. Now you're trying to provide A, B, C. And so when you have so many of these messages that go back and forth between all of these different people, to be able to dump all those in one place and go, help me untangle. It's a knot, right? It's a big word knot, and you just have to be able to untangle it. And so I
And I
think that's
think
one of the biggest areas.
that now that's something I want to point out that I think is important. A couple takeaways on this. One of them, Mike, you said that you're almost like learning it backwards or
I'm learning it backwards.
yes,
I'm
but
learning it start at the end. Yeah.
the key thing though that's important is using the tools. You have to
Yeah.
use them. If you're not using them, you're not understanding what they're good at or not good at. So when you say things like, can you write me a bit of code to, and it hears code, and these AI
Yep.
models, they want to make you happy. That is all they want to do. It really doesn't matter what you tell it. They default to making whatever you say and agreeing with you. So
Wouldn't it be great if it was actually somebody you lived with? Maybe that might be a great characteristic.
you can buy the robot for your house for $20,000.
I'm just saying.
You can have your own personal butler that will agree with you all of the time. but you're using the tool, and so when you're in that case, you're almost better off being vague, right? So it's like, well, wait, if I was vague, it would just tell me probably the simplest way to do it because you have enough conversations with it. It knows you have never asked it for Python code in the history of your conversations, so it would not suggest Python code to you. And it would know that in your position, you're never going to get that through the IT department to ever allow you to install Python and start executing code off your machine. So you have, it would have never even went there. But, when you start giving it can you give me some code or something? It starts picking up on those phrases like, oh, code.
Yeah.
You want code now? Oh, okay. Let me give you code. Here's some Python script that you can put in and execute. And it's like, well, here's my problem. Right.
Right.
And one thing we always teach people when we're out, talking about AI and showing people how to use it is we always say, just ask me any questions you have. Here's my problem. ask me any questions you have. And then the AI basically will interview you, and it will ask you what it needs to know to help you figure out what your problem is. And it may ask you, what tools do you have available to you? Do you have any programming knowledge? Do you have these? Do you have this? Nope, I only have Office products. I have no other subscriptions. I don't have Claude Code. I don't have, I'm not running micro apps. I'm not running any of these things. And then it will go, okay. So, asking the questions and getting it then helps it give you the quickest answer. But how cool is that you have like this massive, that's got to be a lot of tax bills. You got a lot how many do you have?
40,000 tax bills.
Yeah. So can you imagine the old ways, right? You're going to be probably hand keying, your staff.
A 16-character parcel number.
Every one that comes in, you get a batch in the mail of 2,000, and all of a sudden somebody is sitting there. 16 they're getting carpal tunnel. The chance of errors is high.
That's what
right?
I was going to say. The errors, right?
The errors are the biggest.
One parcel number off, and all of a sudden it's crediting it to a new account that isn't the one you wanted in that list. And so
it's an overpayment now, and then you refund someone else's tax bill to the other person because that's where it was applied. And March rolls around and you're like, oh, I sent you that $16,000 back in July.
And then you're trying to go in your bank looking at the deposits, right? And now you're trying to look through all the images to see what check that was. And so you're no way. There's no way.
I will say something about the coding, that it's a lot better now at just doing it. So if you say, hey, here's my problem, give me a solution, and it writes the code and gives you the answer and executes the code, right? It determines, hey, what's the best way to do this? Can I just write an Excel formula, or do I need to write code? And if it decides to write code, it just writes code in the background and executes the code in the background, this vibe coding stuff. And so earlier in the year at the firm, we were working with Python and getting better at it, and trying to think, okay, this is the next step. And then 6 months later, it's like, well, you don't need that anymore. Just have the computer do it for you. So I'm surprised. How long ago were you working with that, Mike, where it was saying, hey, I'll write you a code that you can execute?
Well, that was just today. And like I said,
okay. Because you could say, hey, just execute it.
I did ask it. So that's one thing I did. I did say, I need to create an app that does blah, 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 blah. And that's where it prompted that. It prompted, it was kind of like I gave it too much. I was going down the wrong path. And it's like I was giving it a path to go down, and that's where it went. And then I finally asked the question the right way, and it came out better. So I do want to say, though, I have my IT department's written me a bunch of SQL code for various data integrations. And every time I wanted to make a change to it, or I have an idea, they would always roll their eyes because Mike has a new idea. And ChatGPT has saved those guys because I just take their code, I drop it into ChatGPT, and I go, make it do this, or can it do X, or can it do Y? I want to combine these two tables and then merge them on this particular field, and then I want to see what the results are. And it goes, oh yeah, here it is. Copy, paste, refresh data, and boom, we're up and running with a new thing that I want to do. So,
and ChatGPT has, I think it's called Codex for coding. You can click on that, drop down to, if you want to even get more specific. But all that coding has just exploded here. The coders are excited, but also losing their minds a little bit here. We mentioned, what's the new one? The big one that's the coder. Anthropic.
For Claude. Claude Code?
Yeah, Claude Code is just lighten up the boards. It's really
they seem to be hitting
people.
their
It's
target
not our
markets.
field, right? But that's a leading, right? You start allowing, and then you can just say, here's my idea for an app, and it'll just do all the code behind the scenes for you. Here, I'll build it for you. It's
and runs it.
Yeah, and runs it, exactly. And you're just talking to it. So it's hit that level here in the last X number of months that, so I was surprised to hear that, hey, here's a Python code. It was telling you to go run it instead of run it itself. So
And the thing
way
too,
of asking a
like when
question.
we say like the vibe coding for those learning about that. So vibe coding, and I'm just going to assume by this point, if you've watched us this long, you've at least played with ChatGPT at some point. So vibe coding is literally just talking and telling it what you want to do. I want an app that will do XYZ, whatever it is. It doesn't even matter. And it will take that and it will run the code. You can take a website that you like, right? Let's say like you have a website and you're like, man, I like this other website better. You can take a screenshot of the website that you like. You can take a screenshot of yours, and you can go in and you can say, hey, I need HTML coding. Here's the site that I like. Here's the one I have right now. I want to make these changes. What do I need to do? You can depending on what the tools you're using, it will just read your site and then it will tell you what you need to change and or make the changes.
Yeah.
And then you're done. So it'll make all the changes to make it look like what you want. And the kids like it a lot. Google's kind of jumped in that on the play space area because they have like their app builders and that. So, they have like kids in middle school, I don't know, maybe elementary, but I'm trying to think. My kids did STEM it was middle school. So, they're in middle school and they're basically making apps that like play games and do stuff, and they add learning into it and that sort of stuff, and they get to see the code and make changes. Like it's really cool. And now it opens up its own issues because the software developers I've talked to, I know a few of them, and some of them have not even touched it yet. They're like, I am afraid of this. And I go, well, you're like a senior developer. And one, you're correct to be afraid of this, but for different reasons. And, I tell them, I go, it's not that you should be afraid that it's going to write the software for you. It's going to write the basic stuff. It can only write what it's seen before. It can't create new stuff. None of them can yet. So what you need to do is worry like how to make it secure. And so when some of the other more senior ones start looking at these apps, they're like, there's no cybersecurity built into this.
Yeah.
I literally have admin access. If I just click on the box, I don't even have to log in because they didn't even set the code up for administrative login. So I have full admin access and credentials on these apps. So it leads to like, those of us that are brand new that are making apps and stuff, we don't know how to build cybersecurity into apps or even what the heck that looks like, right?
Right.
But these guys are like, oh no, that's like 101. Like you need to build, you don't even have this, you don't have this, you can't put this on the front end, you have to change this, for the code, you have passwords stored in a table that isn't protected. It's just literally there. The first column's username, the second column is password. Like you can't do that. That's a no. No encryption. So, I think it just leads to different skill sets at that point. But I love the example that you have for it. I think that's great.
So what else, Mike?
I think another thing that it's helped me do, I have a use case for PCI compliance. So payment card industry, for those who don't know what PCI stands for. We deal with a lot of payment card processing agreements because every one of these online platforms has their own proprietary processor for credit cards, debit cards, all ACHs. And obviously no one reads the terms and conditions when you're signing up for an app, much less a payment card agreement. You're agreeing to do all these things that are keeping your data secure or keeping your customers' data secure. For the life of me, I could never say I was compliant because I could never figure out how. I didn't even know what it meant. And I've been in this industry for 17 years. And so I started a deep research on ChatGPT and I go, explain this to me.
Real quick,
it
so
went out-
deep research is a separate button. So
Yeah.
And it really deep think at this point. But when that came out earlier this year, it blew us away. That really was quite elite.
Right.
And when it sits and thinks for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, all of a sudden the answers were a lot better. So sorry.
Right. No, and that's right. So, and that was really kind of the jumping off point because it goes, all right, it gave me a whole new list of acronyms to learn, right? So there's SAQs and AOCs and not the representative from New York, but attestation of compliance and self-assessed questionnaires, and it's like tax forms. There's a billion different forms. And so I kind of said, well, ask me the questions you would need. What do you need to know about our setup in order to tell me which can I even do a self-assessed questionnaire? What's your volume? What is this? What is that? And oh yeah, your volume is low enough. You don't need to hire a company to do this. You don't have to hire an independent auditor. You can do these self-assessed questionnaires. Well, which one do you do? There's SAQ, A, B, BA, all these different ones. And I go, so what do you need to know about what we do in order to do that? Do you take cards over the counter? Is the credit card data going over your network? How are the programs acquiring that information? Is it stored in your system? Or are you passing them off to the third party? In all of these different cases, because we have online payments through different vendors who do it different ways, I've over time just built this GPT model, this custom GPT model that I can now ask it all these questions. And this is something that I go, all right, there's this whole set of requirements my IT department needs. And I go write an email to my IT department asking if we do any of these things. I send it off. I sound like a freaking genius. They send me back a very technical email, and I go, what does this mean? And they go, oh, well, you want to respond yes to this and no to this and yes to this. So I send
you
that
drop
back
you drop their email into ChatGPT.
right. So I'm literally just the middleman in this conversation, right? But they're able to secure the network. You can do, little things like network jacks that you can do network jack locks. So that terminal now sits on a counter in a dedicated network line that goes into a dedicated router that can only go to Chase Payment Tech or to whatever the payment card processor is. I would have never figured all of that out. And then like the ports that need to be open or the IP addresses or whatever. It can tell you all of that, or at least tell you where to go to ask. So the IT department needed information from Chase. So I said, write me the email to Chase that asks what I need, and it writes it out and I read it. And so, I mean, the nice thing is you learn as you go, right? So now I can do something and learn about it instead of learning about it and then applying it. It's like you're on both rails of the railroad at the same time.
And think about it, I was thinking earlier when you were talking, if it's on you all the time and, it's recording everything you're doing. And so when you were talking about your questions earlier, where you were taking all the transcripts and all their answers, well, if it's listening to everything and it's reading your emails, you're going through, it's going to say, hey, a couple days ago, it's going to know all that anyway without you having to put all that information in to get an answer. And so it's just kind of with you on a daily basis. I know it freaks people out, but I think you're going to get real used to it quickly. And these are use cases of things that we're not really thinking about that, hey, it remembers months ago something that happened. I would love that, remind me of, something stupid I did.
You want your own
a couple months
personal
ago.
assistant
to
tell you how awesome you are.
Yeah, just have a little button on and go, hey, dummy, you did that last time. Why do you keep doing that again?
I was watching that episode.
And then every once in a while I'll say, I'm awesome. Yeah. Sorry.
With Anthony, and he was talking about fishing. And you realize that your phones are already doing this to sell you stuff, right? They're trying to sell you crap. I was going to say the other word, but they're trying to sell you stuff or use that information in other ways to get your attention. Now you actually have a way that you can use it for good, right? I mean, or at least to be more productive in your job, is that it's listening to all the stuff that you consider important. It's finally something that's working for you instead of being on the other end of Amazon's app or Google or someone else who's trying to use that data to manipulate you in a certain way.
Absolutely.
No
and
question.
They got to remember the bad guys have this too.
Yep.
So what just came up with us the other day is we had a person come up to the counter and was like, hey, I'm here to make my $4,200 payment. It was for a planning commission. We're like, what are you talking about? What $4,200 payment? Well, I got an email and I responded back, and it was, I got to make this payment. And I was coming in here anyway, so I figured I'd just do it while I'm here. We're like, that none of that is anything official. And so I started digging into, okay, what is it they're getting? How, where, why? How is this happening? And he gave the emails. We had him go do a police report for it. And they're basically, they know who our planners are. They grab the logos. They're taking the logos from the planners. They're taking our logos.
I need to write this down.
Yeah, it's already there. So
sure.
Keep watching it.
No, I wanted to try.
Send some more ones. And so the best I can find of what's happening, and this is getting really more sophisticated now, is they are it's hard to say that it's for sure AI, but when you live and breathe AI, you start to recognize it. Like you see it and you're like, this is AI. You can't necessarily put your finger on it, but just the way it works, you're like, no, this is AI doing this. I know it is. So what's happening is we're publishing our planning commission packets. Okay, so the packet goes out. Here's what they want to build, the location, here's the plans, the application, what they're looking at doing, all that sort of stuff. But in there, in the application piece, has the email address for the developer. And then it's now also seeing what it is they're trying to build and the address, because that's all in there, right? We're always, we had this, to our own detriment in government, we had this push forever about transparency. And transparency, I think, got overused, and it turned from just being open about what's going on to like here's the keys to the kingdom, access anything you want at any time with no safeguards of anything put in place. It went way too far. And so what I'm seeing is it's grabbing that information, it's taking it, and it's immediately automatically sending to the email address, the person's name, signed by our planner, our logos, our stuff. It's all, the AI, we don't have the grammar issues anymore, like in the phishing, right? It's all legit. And in his back and forth responses back, it was answering him pretty quickly. Like you could tell they had a delay built into it. It wasn't like as soon as he hit send, it came back. But it was a very, there's a consistent delay to make it seem like it was more authentic.
Did you check with anybody else if they got email?
So, like from us, no. This has just come up. So I'm looking
because
for
you
this,
think
and
if
I'm
they're
like,
doing one, they're going to do all of them.
This is getting legit next level, right? Yeah. So now you're having these tools that are automatically, and they're not asking for a lot of money, because if you go to planning commission, you're used to paying a few $1,000s anyway. So $4,200 is nothing out of the ordinary. It wasn't like I need $100 million, something astronomical. It was just enough that it was going to be under the radar, that they had no idea. Now you dive into it deeper and all the phishing, like that's not our domain, the email address, right? They made it look super, super official. But we're getting at this point now where, we had our staff meeting today, and I'm like, we need to change how we're doing some of these things. We need to stop. We cannot in any packet start publishing any information that can be used, because it's not that we have any liability for it, but we want to be good stewards of our constituents, right? We get in government because we want to take care of our community. And if I can do one simple thing, like that doesn't make it in the packet, then it makes it that much harder, because they want the easy stuff, right? These bots, they're not submitting FOIAs and trying to get copies of stuff. They're not at that level at this point, because then we charge them money, and they automatically don't want to pay because that's not a thing. So, we're getting to that point where it's doing this all automatically. And so now my new thing after that today, and I shared, with you, Mike, to spread to all the viewers and the other communities, is we need to start looking at how accessible and what's accessible online. It's not about transparency. That's not what this is. If anybody wants to see the application, you can come in the office. You can ask for the application. The clerks, by charter and in most communities, has to keep all the records. They have everything. They will give it to you on file. but just taking a few extra steps that we never thought anything of it. Who thought an AI, when we send a packet out, is scanning the packet, grabbing information for who it is, the names, what they're doing, how much they're spending, what process, what step they're in, and then trying to get a few grand in payments out of them? Like that, it is just, it's this whole
if you do it thousands of times, right, to every single
the tool's
community,
doing it.
right?
The people aren't doing. There's nobody doing
no,
it.
exactly.
They have the Python script coding there, right? That's all it's doing is. I bet you they're signed up on all of our websites. I bet you for Ann Arbor, Rochester, whatever. They as soon as you send out a planning commission, they're probably doing it for city council. They're just trying to get that information to try to get in behind the scenes on it. And this was a new level that I have not seen come through before like that. It's getting really good.
Fraud's probably happening right now. We don't even know it, right, to us. And so I think I mentioned this before, but my family has a code. If somebody's asking for money and it looks like me and I talks like me and seems, ask me
What's
the code.
The code? The
yeah,
code?
Exactly.
Yeah. Don't say it around any of the phones either. They're all listening.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, it's a legit thing. And so, I mean, we're getting hit with this, and, you think, Mike and I as treasurers, it's one of those, we're the gatekeepers of the funds, right? So we're always going to be the target more than anyone else to try to get access to any information, words, logins, whatever it is.
And think about the turnover of treasurers. The new treasurers are always coming in. It's ripe for that, right? Don't know what's going on.
Well, and so much of it isn't under our control either. I mean, right, Anthony? I mean, I think one of the biggest areas that I want to focus on more is accounts payable, because it wouldn't take much. Like you said, people are trying to come in and take $1 million. But if they can set up a fake vendor and send you some fake invoices for a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, your procurement policies aren't designed to catch those things. Those types of things will just happen, right? And to the extent you can, again, get rid of that risk or reduce that risk by having ways of validating vendors when they come to you. Anthony, I know you talk about how and correct me if I'm wrong, you still require humans to come into your office to change bank account information, right?
I do, yes. Yeah, that was something that, a while back when I was seeing how easy it was, because I faked myself. That was my test. So I got some tools and I said, how easy is it to clone me? And when I found out how ridiculously easy that was in a very short period of time, everything I required in person. Like that's nice that you made a phone call. That's nice that you talked to the HR person. You want your ACH changed. If your accounts payable, what do we do the same thing with RFPs that I just talked about with Planning Commission? When we go to award those RFPs, right, a lot of times those are in the council packets. And it's like you literally just spelled out who the person is that's going to be handling the payments, who's the project manager, you gave them all of the ammunition to just take it out on you. And we never thought of anything before of it. It was never an issue until it was. But in writing for sure.
And now all the millions of people that are watching this podcast are going to know this.
Good.
So even more. Well, I meant, hey, why don't we try this out on some other?
Protect yourself education show.
Yeah.
But you do have that with Mike. Do you have that also then in your office, right? I mean, it changes the way you take payments or changes to banking information.
It's funny. I at least have struck the fear into my AP staff that I go, never hesitate to ask me, right? So I haven't restricted it to people who have to be there in person. But it's funny how many times I get a question because I have account validation services, which basically means if you want a payment electronically, I can submit it through my bank. They'll see if it's flagged for any fraudulent behavior or transactions. It'll validate the name against the name that we have, so the account name has to match. So it's kind of like a positive pay, but it's before you actually send any money anywhere. And I've had that staff talk to me and they're like, so the name doesn't match and They don't have like a canceled check or something. And I go, well, how did you get the information? Did you call them? And said, no, they came in and handed it to me. I'm like, that's okay then. If they came in and handed it to you, we're just fine. But at least they're so afraid of this happening now because it's
That's
happened a
great.
couple times that they're asking me those questions. But you can't be in a worse situation than if you change someone's information. We've had a situation where a vendor's email server was compromised, and that the fraudster inserted themselves into an existing email conversation. Those emails the fraudster sent came from that server. Our IT department verified it. We changed it. We didn't do the callbacks or something else took place. And one transaction goes out the door, right? It's 5,000, however much money it is. You don't find out about it right away because you paid the invoice. It takes 30 days for the vendor to realize they have not been paid. They call you back and it's like, oh yeah, you changed your information. Well, now the vendor's out an amount of money. You did everything you think on good faith, but your actions literally led to someone else's, not receiving their funds. Even if you did everything right and everything legal, you still had this broken vendor government relationship you have to mend somehow, right? And you don't necessarily know where the liability lies either. So these are all things that could have been avoided if you were able to do that due diligence on the front end.
And that's a good point. So just as like kind of a summary, wrap up on that. So we have these new threats that you can't like sharing it in this format with each other, with the viewers, click subscribe, is important because you will never think about that until it happens to you.
Yeah.
So now, when I hear Mike talk about, the thing like, oh, the business email, okay, well, how would have we prevented that from happening? And then just making sure, Mike, in your case, having your AP staff be scared to death to ever change anything ever without you signing off if they have questions or anything. Like, that's the way it has to be. Like, because they're, they can't get the $1 million. We have all the it is easy. The ransomware days are still around, but becoming less and less because we're starting to build up those shields against things like ransomware taking over your entire system. So they're not able to get those easier big dollar amounts as quick. So now they're probably finding out that, man, if I just get 5,000 here, 10,000 here, the bigger the city, they pay $10,000 invoices and never hear a thing ever again. Who knows that the vendors are real, right? If you have 30,000 vendors in your system, who knows that they're all legit, still with you, not with you anymore. There's a whole, and until we start sharing these things, not as we did anything bad. That's not what it is. It's this is what happened to us, planning commission example. Now we share it. And now bring that back to your municipality and go, hey, this has been happening. Do we do the same thing? This wouldn't have happened if they didn't share this information. Yeah. It wouldn't have happened if we talked to our AP people and said, you will under no circumstance change things unless it's in person, or if it's by email, you come verify it with me and we're going to figure this out. We wouldn't know that. And then these things would happen, and then it's going to happen to 30 municipalities, 50 municipalities. And a lot of times there's shame in it. People don't like to talk about, sure, I was a victim of ransomware because I clicked on a link. So has everyone. But, until we start talking about this more and making it more available to talk about without being stigmatized and shamed, shunned into the corner sort of thing, we lose out on that. So,
quick funny story on that is I had a client 3-4 years ago ask if they should buy Bitcoin today at that point, just in case, so that they'll have it available to pay the ransomware. And I said, well, you can just buy the Bitcoin when that happens, and you don't have to, have the volatility. But also, if you're worried about that, shouldn't you work on making your database a little more protected here instead of buying Bitcoin because it's going to happen? No, they were an entity that's large and old, so I'm sure they're not going to be able to fix everything. But I thought that was funny. Now,
They
in
probably
hindsight,
called
they
it
should have bought the Bitcoin. In hindsight,
it was about Bitcoin. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that Bitcoin would have been worth a lot.
yeah, it would have been a
May
nice
not
play.
even needed to levy taxes for a year.
Exactly. I made a mistake there.
All right. Well, on that note, any other final closing comments? Otherwise, we'll wrap this one up. All good on your side?
Thanks
All
for,
good
thanks
on
for
that
coming,
one?
Mike. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Our
special
first
thanks.
guest.
Yes, Mike, you're number one. You're our favorite guest that we have ever had.
Exactly.
That is amazing. I am now the Bill Murray of the Anthony and Greg on Intelligence podcast because Bill Murray was infamously Dave Letterman's first guest. So
See, there
I'm
you
not as
go.
good looking and not nearly as funny, but
And in years from now, you'll be able to say
Yes.
hashtag number one.
Exactly.
there you go.
Absolutely.
When you guys sign on with Spotify, I'll come talking. I'll
There
come
you
back.
go. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We'll get right on that licensing deal. Here we go.
Yes.
All right. And on that bombshell, thank you, everybody, for joining with us for this episode. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Stay tuned.